Hello and welcome to HighCast. I got the mics wrong. How terrible was that? This podcast is recorded in Highland FM, the studios of Highland FM. Go to highlandfm.org.au. This podcast is brought to you by Rad Solutions. Rad Solutions is my business, actually. And it's a business that we established to engage youth across the Highlands and beyond. My business partner and I have a very broad and diverse background, and we're interested in helping people. So if you want to know more about helping young people in the Highlands, go to radsolutions.com.au. Our guest today is Anthea Falkiner. I hope I got that right. Anthea is a Mittagong local, a Frensham alumni, and here we go, and a budget planner. Oh my God, that was the worst intro ever. I apologize, listeners.
It makes me sound really exciting, doesn't it?
Yeah,
budget planner.
Budget planner. What is a budget? What is a budget planner?
Well, it's a good question. I actually don't like that word at all.
Spending planner.
Spending planner is kind of how I refer to myself, and I would say there's about 100 of us around Australia and New Zealand now who do what I do.
That's rarefied air. If 100 in Australia and New Zealand, there'd be more than 100 professional footballers.
Mm-hmm.
There would be more than 100 microbiologists. So there's only 100 across Australia and New Zealand. That is very rarefied air.
It's very special. I feel to be in very special company. And I would say the reason why there are only 100 of us is that the program that I take people through has really only been around for, in its current form, a couple of years. It has its roots in a particular software package called Simply Budgets, which came about 10 years ago. And that program was the program that turned our finances around completely.
So Simply Budget.
Simply Budgets was the original program. You can't actually buy that program anymore, but it's turned into a whole kind of education system around budgeting and spending planning.
So the education part is the I mentioned to Anthea before we started that I went on her website. So Anthea is a small business owner. And we'll disclose that straight away. She's a local business owner, and as part of this, we'll be promoting her product. But the really interesting part, when I went on her website, there's the gentleman who owns the software. Mm-hmm. Started off the video. There's a video that says, "Budget or managing your money is not taught in school," and I was like, "Yeah, that's right. It's not." Mm. Why do I get to 36 and not know, and just be an idiot with money? How does society let us do that?
How does society let us down? Do you mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How do we get to the point where we're at, where we don't go through some sort of financial management in our late teens, early 20s, when we probably need it the most? We start those bad habits. I know I did in my early 20s, and they can I'm still terrible with money. So why are we let down? What's the deal?
Well, it's a couple of things. I mean, budgeting taught in schools is pretty basic. I mean, a budget is a very two-dimensional kind of process. So you've got, usually it's based on the month. Money comes in, money goes out, right? It doesn't really account for the kind of expenses that happen annually, maybe 3 monthly, maybe they happen, once every 6 months. Maybe they're those unexpected expenses that are going to have, like the car's going to break down at some point. Your fridge is going to break down at some point. You're going to need to replace those things. Usually budgets don't really take into account those things, even though they should. So that's one thing. So when you do commerce at school, at high school, or maths or whatever, it's a very basic kind of budget that you're looking at balancing. And usually it's in some kind of employee, like when you get your first job, you've got this much salary and these are your expenses and that sort of thing.
This is your budget. This is...
Yeah. I don't know about, I don't think beer's mentioned in high school
Really?
very frequently, but so that's one part of the problem. It's a very sort of foreign out there, you know, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to teenagers. And the other thing is, one of the major banks, I won't say who it is, likes to kind of get in the pockets of school children and offers them particular bank accounts.
That is the best marketing ever done, though.
Yeah, it is, because then all those school children are on their books, and then once they leave school, they get a nice little letter in the post saying, would you like your first credit card? We'll give you a $500
Is that legit?
credit so that you can buy your formal dress or, you know, a few 6-packs of beer or whatever. You know, doesn't that sound appealing? So many of us, including myself, ended up with a credit card when we first left school, and then we kind of stuck with that credit card ever since and just keep topping up the balance.
That's funny, because that's I mentioned at the start of the program, My Business Rad Solutions. We often talk about said bank and the success of that marketing program, because it's an example of, you know, getting young people early and getting loyalty for a long period of time. We never talk about the ethics of it. we always just not always, but we use it as an example of success. But what you're saying is it's not always successful, or the ethics of it aren't the greatest.
I would say they're a little questionable. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
Wow. Okay. So money isn't taught at school. We're bombarded with all kinds of marketing and media stories that, in a way, promote and idolize spending. You know, in a lot of ways, you're nothing unless you can spend money. So how do we find ourselves in a position where we don't know how to manage our money?
Well, I guess it just happens incrementally over time, you know. We just keep increasing the credit card, where, you know...
So you got a credit card straight out of school? Is that...
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
I must have changed accounts earlier.
Maybe you didn't, you know.
Maybe they saw me coming a mile off.
Well, I know my parents relied on credit cards a lot. So it was just... I mean, it was the 80s when I... late 80s when I was leaving school.
Come on, 1995, sure.
No, thank you. You're very, very kind. I appreciate that. You know, and so I just never really thought much about it. And my mum gave me a credit card, and, you know, yeah, that's right. So I think it starts there, and there's, you know, plenty of bright, shiny objects now out there, left, right, and centre and people have this attitude of, I need to have it now, you know. I need to have I need to furnish my house in the perfect way right now. I know, you know, I've just got my first job, and, you know, so there's no sort of delayed gratification anymore. There's this expectation that we should be able to have everything that we really want right now rather than waiting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the philosophy of expectation, the philosophy of what we actually need, you know, along with good money management, along with good budget management, is probably something that needs to be taught as well. I make it quite well known. I've moved from the city, and one of the things that I really wanted to get away from was McMansions, of people who live teeth by jowl in housing estates where they have 4 or 5 bedroom properties. They've got which they have to air condition and heat. They've got TVs in each one, beds in each one, you name it. It's furnished to the max. But then they spend all day in their car going to and from work so they can afford to house the things that they never get to use. Like, it's just bizarre. And so I think that, along with the management of your money, the philosophy of, do you actually need this, is really important as well.
Yeah, your comment is interesting because it sort of reminds me of the FIRE movement. I don't know if you're aware of this movement
please
in
explain.
Australia, and it's originated in the States. So FIRE stands for Financially Independent, Retire Early.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so there are lots of, if you kind of follow, if you're interested in money and money management, then you probably come across these people who are, often they're in their mid-30s and they're retiring, because they've built up.
If only.
So because they've built up, a certain nest egg, but what they're doing is they're living reasonably frugally. They're not extravagant by any means, and their ethics and their kind of values are quite different to, maybe the baby boomers generation or.
No, I'd say it'd be my generation too.
Absolutely.
I've got lots of friends who live not necessarily beyond their means, but to the limits of their means. And as I was saying before the podcast started, one of the reasons I moved here was because of the cost of housing, and so for my wife and I, and for many of my peers, we have to live at our means to be able to mortgage a house.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of part of reality, even if we're philosophically not aligned to spending all the time. It's almost a necessity these days.
Yes, absolutely. And there are things like, coming back to your question of how do we get ourselves into these situations. Well, we were in that situation. 10 years ago, we were living in Sydney. We had a lovely apartment on Bronte Beach. We could just basically walk over the park and down to the beach. We had 2 little kids. But, we were in this situation where we had this massive mortgage and we were both self-employed. We both, my husband he trades rare guitars down here and in Sydney, and so he would
Sounds
sell.
like a pretty awesome gig, actually.
He would sell, an expensive guitar one day, and we'd be flush, and then nothing for a couple of months, and our income was just all over the place. And he'd had to, basically, he divorced. He had to buy out his ex-wife and then his ex-partner who he was de facto with, and then he had to single parent his daughter. And so, it was just like a convergence of all sorts of life stuff that happens and it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
And a lack of consciousness around what we were doing with our money. So, I was a fairly new mum. I had 2 little kids, and budgeting or planning our money was the last thing. And I just actually thought, how is it possible even when you're self-employed? Like, maybe it can work for someone on a salary, but for someone who's self-employed, when you have no idea when your income is coming in and you don't really know, you've got a better idea what your expenses are, but in terms of income, if it's really sporadic, how do you budget for that? So that was my big question. And so we got to the point where we just knew we had to sell up. We went to the accountant and he just sort of looked at our finances and said, right, so you guys have, this massive mortgage and you're doing it on half an income. So how's that working out for you? And it was pretty embarrassing, I have to say.
So
but
just to go back a step, when you took the mortgage on, was there any red flags then? Was the bank inappropriate in lending to you?
Well, no, actually, because my husband bought the place for $280,000 or something 12 years prior. So he bought it for
$280,000 in Bronte.
I know,
My gosh.
I know, and that place would be worth nearly $2 million now, probably.
Wow. Okay.
I don't even like to think about it because we don't own it anymore. But he bought it, and then he had to keep remortgaging to basically do the things that he needed to do to live. So it wasn't a case of them lending irresponsibly. It was just that life got crazy, and he had to keep dipping back into the equity. I think mortgage brokers and managers call them equity eaters, where we have to keep going back to fund our lifestyle.
But in itself, is that ethical that they
allow that?
Yeah,
to
but because surely they as part of the process, they see your income, what comes in and what goes out. So, and I shouldn't take.
Well, maybe they wouldn't do it now, with the banking Royal Commission.
I was wondering whether that would come up or not.
Yeah.
Because it is, and it's one of the main reasons for the subprime mortgage crisis in the States that led to the global financial crisis. And I don't want to take away people's individual responsibility, but surely somewhere along the line someone goes to you, hey, do you really come on, and then if you absolutely insist, sure, sign on the dotted line, but someone along the lines should be going, hey, so you got yourself, someone didn't go, hey, life got in the way and you found yourself in a situation where significant amounts of debt, young kids, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm going to solve the war myself. So how did you solve it?
Well, we knew we had to sell. I mean, we just really, we couldn't work ourselves around that. So, and it was at the time that I just really wanted to get out of Sydney anyway. I was over the traffic. I was over just the pace.
So what's that, 10 years ago?
That was 10 years ago, yeah.
So what was I doing in 2008? Yeah, it wasn't that bad then. It still wasn't that
Sydney,
good, yeah.
It wasn't as bad as it is now, but it was still pretty bad. And in Bronte it was bad because...
it's the eastern suburbs, right? There's nowhere to go, and they haven't developed anything since, 1982, so...
That's right. So we decided to sell. We... Luckily, it was pre-GFC, and we came out with a little bit of money, not too much. We came down here. We bought a nice low mortgage home. We kind of learned our lesson we didn't want to have a massive mortgage. But I knew that if we didn't solve this problem of the unconscious spending, that we would just end up in the same place, even with a low mortgage, So I looked around at various kind of solutions, and I tried Excel spreadsheets and tracking, like writing down everything that I spent and keeping receipts and like logs and logs of expenditure, which, I have never looked back on to this day. It's just in boxes, basically.
I was thinking about this morning when I was preparing for the podcast. I've written a budget. And I wrote essentially an annual budget. I looked at what comes in over the year. I looked at expenditure month to month, times it by 12, and they came in. I earned more than I spent, and that was it. I saved the Excel spreadsheet, and I probably haven't looked at it again.
Right? Yeah.
And then so I went to my wife this morning. I said, "How much is in the account there?" I'm like, "Oh, okay. Maybe I need to speak. Maybe this podcast is going to come in handy."
Maybe, who knows? So I tried that. I read books, I did all sorts of things. And this came along, this spending planner program came along, and it just really shifted everything, because what it allowed me to do is it allowed me to see exactly the number that my bank balance needed to be on any given day through the year,
so hang on,
for me to be on track.
How does that work? Is it an application? How does it work real time?
Okay, so
don't give your secrets away, but
yeah, I'll divulge as much as you want to know. But basically, it comes with. So the program comes with its own very unique software that does those calculations. But it's also education. It's also mentoring and hand-holding through the process. Okay, so it's a lot more than just. I mean, you can go and buy an app or a book, but you won't have someone there to kind of hold your hand when life stuff comes up.
Because I was thinking about, because Anthea contacted me about coming on the podcast, and I was thinking about. what kind of software she might use or what kind of program management. And I think you've summed it up. The reason why I wanted to talk to you is it's about life, right? Even though money is the dollar symbol on top of it, it is actually about control of your life. The money's just the part at which you're exerting the control. Is that like, am I reading this right?
Absolutely. And I think money is one of those things like health, like if you don't manage your fitness and what you're eating, if you don't maintain some level of control around those things, then your health is going to decline. And it's the same thing with your finances. If you don't maintain some level of control around it, you're going to get flabby financially.
That is like I do a lot of reading and a lot of personal growth stuff. So heaps on fitness and philosophy, etc. But I've never heard anyone. I haven't been too focused on money, so I'll say that. But I've never heard anyone describe that like flabby finances, and it's the truth. Like if you're eating McDonald's in like if you're doing the money equivalent of McDonald's every day, you're going to get a McDonald's bank budget.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, okay.
And it might not look it from the outside. From the outside, you might be driving a beautiful car that's all financed.
Yeah.
You might be living in a beautiful house that is, where you're mortgaged to the hilt. You might be wearing beautiful clothes. You might be earning really good money in actual fact. But if you're not, because it's all about expenses, if your expenses are out of control and you're grocery shopping every day of the week without a list, and you're, making internet purchases every second day without thinking too much about it, chances are you are overspending and you're not, I guess it's about thinking about what do you really want to be spending your money on? Do you want to be spending your money on the things you really value in life, which might be, paying for your kids' education? It might be paying off your mortgage fast. It may be getting your credit card debt right down. It might be travel, and instead you might be spending it on just frittering it away on things that you're really not aware of that you're spending it on.
That is a really sobering analogy, actually. No, I don't know. I mean that seriously. Seriously, when you were saying all those things, I'm not an internet shopper, but things like going to the grocery store without a list, that would be an easy one that I would do, and come back and go, I already have one of those. Especially fresh produce. How many times do I buy a pumpkin and then have 2 pumpkins and essentially put one in the compost? Okay, and that's you think that's only a couple of bucks, but a couple of bucks every week, and then you apply that same example over and over again, and you're probably up to $100 or $1,000 every year. That's could be in my pocket as opposed to the big grocery store chains. It's funny. I think I'm really actually disappointed in myself that I never thought of money in the same way that I think of, I apply that philosophy to work, to fitness, to education, whatever it is. But money, I've always just gone, money comes in, money goes out. And I've never actually...
It's interesting, isn't it? And it is one of the number one stresses for families and couples. It's one of the number one things that influences whether a couple will stay together or not. Because if you have, and this is very frequently happens, different people in a couple have different values around money. So one might be the spender, one might be the saver, and it becomes very emotional and heated. And, it's just... money worries are the number one cause for divorce. So if that one factor could be improved in people's lives, we would have more marriage. We would have more couples staying together.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I'm very lucky to be in a circumstance where I don't have to necessarily. I don't worry about money. In fact, I've checked my bank account for the first time today because I was preparing for this podcast. I'm like, I should really just get a handle on this because I don't even look at it. And I don't earn a particularly great amount, but I know that my expenditure at the moment is less than. But I think back over the past 10 years of which I had a mortgage, and I reckon I've wasted $100,000 on not on not having the best rates, not putting money in the right accounts, all those sort of things. I reckon I could be $100,000 better off if I was just smarter and prepared. Not that I've thrown $100,000 down the pokies, but I reckon I would be $100,000 more ahead if I was just better at it.
Yeah, that reminds me of a client that I have been working with over the last few months. When we first started working together, I said to her, how much, I said, what's your crack kind of habit, around spending money? And she said, clothes, for sure. Like, she said, I'm quite, she's in her mid 40s now, and she said, I'm pretty frugal with clothes now, but in my 20s and 30s, I said to her, how much do you reckon you would have spent on clothes? And she said, easily $100,000, maybe more. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's, that's getting close to a really good deposit on a home in Sydney or something like that. Or maybe not quite in Sydney now, but, that's a pretty sobering kind of thought, isn't it? And, for other people, it will be takeaway. It'll be eating out 3 or 4 times a week.
And like I was saying that you don't even notice it. Like it's I wouldn't have been clothes or whatever, but a case of beer, a couple of takeaways every week, and then maybe a night out. And that's $152. That was $200 a week that I would just, from probably 25 to 31 or whatever, I would just.
Yeah,
that was just part of living.
Where would we all be? If we had that down, we would all have really established asset portfolios. By the time we were 30, wouldn't we? If we had that.
And it's funny. Go back to how we started the conversation. Excuse me. No one at school they talk about discipline or whatever, but you learn history and. What's my son learning? Compound words. Like, who cares about compound words? How to manage a budget and spending. It's almost like it's a deliberate ploy that the what do they call it? The global corporate infrastructure uses to dumb us down.
Ooh, conspiracy theories. I love it. No, but it's true. I think
why?
It's true.
What other reason? I don't know.
Yeah. Don't think. Just listen to these these advertisements we're gonna put on, and make sure you buy the latest sofa and.
And my kids, I don't know how old your children are. My kids are almost 4 and 6. The amount of advertising that they're bombarded with, and even things like. What did my son say the other day? He said, "Can we watch name brand, and then the title of the show?" So the advertising is built in, and at 6 years old, like he's all over it. He knows, which brands sponsor which comics and the whole lot. Yeah. Like it's just pervasive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a high school teacher, interestingly, but that's my background. Yeah. And I'm an English teacher, so I do value.
Oh, that's what English compound education. Words are for.
That's what compound words. And also, they also teach a lot of critical literacy in English.
I'm not suggesting that,
which is really so important for that.
I'm not suggesting the curriculum is wrong. I'm just I'm trying to give a juxtaposition. It's deficient
in certain areas, definitely, absolutely, and that is definitely one. Yeah.
Okay, so you found yourself in the Highlands. You got your mortgage under control. What happened next?
Well, as I said, the fantastic thing about this program that I put myself through was that we could know on any given day.
Yeah, that's what we got to. Then I went, applications.
To be.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I tend to do that.
So ever since then, I've known if I look at the software and the software will tell me Today, your bank account needs to be $2,000 to cover all of those future expenses, including the goals that I've set up in there, including the money that I want, the extra money I want going towards the mortgage, or this trip that we want to have, or whatever my goals are, whatever our goals are, they're in there as well. And so I look at my actual account, and my account might say, you have $2,200 in there today.
Yeah, I'm going to spend $200 on crack.
So, exactly. So I have choices. I can spend it on crack. I can go to the supermarket. I can go out to dinner. I can put some money off my mortgage. Or conversely, and this happens a lot because I'm a small business owner and, our income still fluctuates. Today I can see I'm $200 behind.
Oh, no.
Okay. So, but, I don't have to freak out about it. I can see that, it's all right. I've got $1,800. I'm not at zero balance yet. I don't have to freak out. But I do need to suck my belt in a little bit for the next couple of weeks, until we regroup, until we get back to target.
So, and I hate to keep interrupting, but I tend to do that. So again, it is like life. You're setting a life goal, and it's your finances is just one part, a very, very important part that you're now getting under control. Man, I'm really embarrassed. Like I thought like I had optimization like right down packed, but this is a key part that I just have just completely ignored. So essentially you're applying life optimization, like you said you would, to exercise or to eating habits. You're just applying that to your spending. It's like calorie counting, essentially.
Kind of, except not so. I don't have to think about it quite that much as calorie counting. It's the idea of calorie counting just abhors.
But well, that's interesting because I was going to say the same. That's probably one of the reasons that I've avoided money control, because
you don't want to be taking dockets every 5 seconds, and you don't want to be writing down every single thing you spend money on.
It bores me.
Exactly. Who wants to be doing that? And I don't want to be doing that either, and I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. It's a little bit top heavy in the beginning, in that it takes a little while to gather your expenses and get them all into the system. But once you do that, you go into a monitoring phase.
Yeah.
And it just takes 10 minutes a week to check in.
Huh. Because you go to a dinner party or a barbecue or whatever, and there's always a couple of the gentlemen. I don't know what it's like with the ladies, but a couple of the gentlemen who are like, I refinance my mortgage or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, can we talk about something that's a little bit more interesting? But and it just puts me off. So so what you're saying actually sounds fairly reasonable. Actually, it's like, hey, get control, and then monitor. Again, I'm very embarrassed.
Oh, don't be embarrassed. I think, gosh, I mean, you sound like you're not doing too badly compared to a lot of people.
I think I'm very lucky is that I've always had good jobs.
Yeah.
And because I've had good jobs, I haven't had to worry. So, and I've always had the basic premise of more comes in than goes out. Like that's, and not like, I don't think they teach you that at school. That's just like life 101.
Yeah.
Like calorie counting. You're going to have a flabby bank account. But that's probably the limit of my, the thought that I've put into it. Apart from I've applied my philosophy. So I'm not really a consumer. I like to do things that have a little impact on the earth, and that actually reflects in spending, because I can buy lots of primary produce, like fresh produce, that even if I waste it, it still goes into my compost that then goes under my veggie garden and it's limits. So I've probably got a bit more control than most, but still, like I was saying, I reckon I've wasted so much money.
Look, we all have. We've all been there, definitely.
Okay, so
definitely, yeah.
You then,
but the other thing I want to say is, what I really like about having a system like this is that I don't, because I'm not worried about, like often, I might have a lot of money in my bank account, but I'd have that question mark. Can I spend money on this? Do I really have enough? And so I would be constantly worried about overspending, and so there would be that guilt factor. And
so this is after you've gone down the journey of control, or before?
No, before.
Yeah, okay.
Before, yeah, when I didn't know what number I needed to be at.
Okay.
There was always this vague sense of, we've got some money, but I don't really know if we can spend it or not. But now I know exactly when we've got excess to spend. Do
you feel like it's over control? Like you've got it all down. Like today I can spend $15.17 and I can't go outside that. And does it ever feel like that?
I think in the beginning, the first month or so, when you're adjusting to this new habit pattern, it can feel a little bit like you're wearing clothes that are slightly too tight for you or something like that. But it doesn't take long for it just to become second nature. And it's even funny. I'll make reference to it again. The way that you talk about like your habit pattern. That's exactly the same language that people use. Yeah, if you want to lose weight, you have to develop a habit pattern. And all that sort of stuff. So it is. It's the same kind of methodology. It's the same philosophy that you're applying, and you do have to have control. But you absolutely. You have cheat days. Well, you can see when you can have a cheat day, because it's like, woohoo, we've got a bit of excess money.
Time for crack today.
We can have a crack day today, and we don't have to feel any guilt about it.
The local barrel crack dealers must be doing all right.
One thing I was going to say was occasionally I have people come to me who just, I can see it. They just want me to wave a magic wand and just make it all go away, and for them not to change really. And, and I have to kind of shake them up and go, hang on a second, I can lead you through the process. I can set it all up for you, but you have to apply it. You can't just think that all of your problems are just going to be miraculously taken care of.
That's really funny, because one of the first guests I had on the podcast was a personal trainer, and just used the exact same words that you just used to someone's weight goals or fitness goals. She said the exact same thing. She can tell pretty much within the first 30 seconds if someone just wants a magic body, a body magically, or if they're going to work over a year to achieve something, and you can kind of get the same.
Definitely, absolutely.
So they're the ones you charge more, I imagine. The tougher clients.
Well, I just have to be a bit of a tough love agent, I think, in those situations.
And I think as well, and with Natalie, the personal trainer, and with yourself, what I get the sense that you're doing this for the right reasons as well. Like I don't like engaging with big business, because I feel like it's a corporate facade, and there's thousands of people working behind it who don't necessarily want to work for a big bank or a big shopping whatever. It's just wheels that are turning that are faceless and heartless. But I get the sense that because you've been through it, like even though it's a business and you're making money off it, that it's important to you that your customers get the results. Is that right?
Well, I have to say I've only opened my doors last October, so I'm really not hugely flush just yet. Well, but I would say 20 or so clients now that I'm working really happily with, and and the whole reason why I started to do it was that we just had such great success with it. I mean, within the first 2 years of doing this program, we had paid off 50 grand off our mortgage. We'd bought 2 investment properties, and we'd just always known ever since then what that number needed to be, and tracked along really nicely. And I remember my husband just kind of pinching himself after a couple of years and saying, this is really freaky.
And he still does the guitar trading?
He does, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So it can work with self-employed people.
Yeah.
I've totally lost my train of thought now. That's funny. But yeah, the whole reason that, I mean, I started doing it 10 years ago, and I just kept saying to friends, "Oh, you should totally do this. It's really good." It was just one of those things.
Multi-level marketing. What's going on?
It wasn't at all like that, because it wasn't a business for me then. It was just, you've got to do this. It's so good.
Have you ever read, I forget who wrote it, The $100 Startup?
No, I haven't.
Or have you read The 4-Hour Workweek?
Yes.
Tim
I've tried to.
Yeah,
I have to say
I've read it. And I'm trying to apply it. So go to radsolutions.com today. But the $100 startup's really interesting it describes a lot of instances of people like yourself who do something because it's worked and it's of real benefit to them. And because it's of benefit to them, the passion that you have for it and the value that you have for it then enables you to go off and do it for other people. You probably don't need to now. You've already done your $100 startup.
Don't need to read it.
No.
Yeah, it'd be interesting for sure.
Yeah, it is a good read. And,
yeah.
I hope that more people in the Highlands and beyond do start things, and it doesn't have to be huge. And it sounds like what you've just done is just started off little and a growing
shoestring.
Yeah.
With a Wix website, and
is Wix any good? Because I use
it's pretty good actually.
I use WordPress, and the customer service is hopeless. But they're cheap.
Yeah.
So I don't mind. But is the interface any good?
Look, it's fine. I just wanted to start without too many overheads to start with, and so it's.
So you made your own website?
Yeah.
Yes.
You could tell, couldn't you? You could tell.
I went on it today and I'm like, that looks like something that I could do.
Yeah. So don't be too judgmental out there, anyone who's got a web-based design background.
But that's not what it's about.
Exactly.
And I think you're applying your own philosophy, your budget philosophy to, well, let's just start a business. Let's see if we can be in control of my own destiny income-wise as well. That's what I think they're the things that really excite me. Is I've worked across the corporate environment and the government environment for a long time now, and there's heaps of people that can't do things. For whatever reason, I can't do that. Can you write something? Nah, can't do that. Couldn't possibly do that. So I really am attracted to people who are doing interesting things with their lives, and even if it fails or whatever, are just giving it a go. Because there's so many people who just don't do anything.
Yeah, and I think that coming back to your original question about, the passion that I have for it, it totally comes out of just finding that solution for myself. And I just want to share something else. When we were in the poo, the financial poo,
you
10
can
years
say
ago,
shit, just not too many times. It's a family program.
When we were in that situation, we had a little road trip and we went to visit these friends of ours up in Bellingen, and my friend Tanya, I was telling her what was going on, and she said she looked at me in the eyeball. She eyeballed me and she said, "Anthea, you need to take control of this situation. Do not leave it up to him. You need to, wear the pants or whatever. You need to take control." Now, other people might have different ideas about that or whatever, but it kind of jolted me. It forced me to go, shit, I can actually take control. I don't have to kind of live at the whim of the circumstances.
Yeah.
And that was a really powerful kick up the bum, that conversation. And it really turned my whole perspective and life around. And that's when I started to really kind of take control of our finances and trying different things. I don't know where I was going to go with that, but I just
doesn't matter. This is a podcast. I think last time we were talking about aliens and where the AI is going to take us. So, but this is my. You asked me at the beginning, like, where is this podcast going? Or before the podcast. Well, this is where it's going. It's having conversations with people like yourself who can tell stories that are meaningful in life. Once upon a time, my friend told me, "Get your act together," and you know what? I did. And I've juxtaposed it several times throughout this podcast about you could apply what you said to someone's eating habits, someone's work-life balance, whatever it is. But they're the things that matter, right? So once upon a time, a friend told you, "Hey, you're ruining it," and if you continue to ruin it, who knows the depths that you might go to.
Yeah, and it's so important to have friends like that who will call a spade and tell you, not just kind of, oh, poor Anthea, oh, that's a bad situation, but actually just, give you a kick up the bum.
Yeah.
So I feel very grateful that she did that, and I often reference her in my story because she had a very profound effect on my life.
It's funny that, isn't it? Like if you could track it on a graph or whatever, that there's one moment where probably less than 30 seconds worth of words have an outcome that's significantly different. Like how stupid is life that 30 seconds worth of words from the right person can completely change your outlook and the direction that you take.
Yeah.
And to bring it back to the very beginning, why isn't that said at school? 30 seconds, balance your budget. Money matters. Look after it, otherwise it will look after you. And you will find yourself in either really good circumstances or really bad circumstances. But hey, we're going to leave it up to you. Good luck, goodbye. Have fun.
Yeah. Well, I don't have an answer to that. I think
but that's all philosophical and you don't have to have answers to that. That's for you to solve next time that you're on the podcast when I hear about your millions.
Well, my focus really is on trying to help as many people as I can at the moment, because I just see so many people who are in the same or similar situation that we were in, and it's painful. I know what that's like. So I would really like to see, and it's not just for people who have massive credit card debt. I have a number of clients who do have massive credit card debt. I'm talking between 20 and 100K, quite
I had a $20,000
substantial credit card debt
once. Luckily, I had enough money to pay it off, but far out.
Yeah, that's pretty oppressive. But I also have clients who are pretty good money, like they've got some good savings built up, but they're still anxious, because they don't know whether they have enough. They don't know, and they're still a little bit unconscious about their spending. And, there are so many people out there on really good incomes, but their expenses are eclipsing them, and so they might have all these big goals, sending kids to private school, and, they've got really, their heart's in the right place. They're working hard, but they're not seeing those gains, and they're still living paycheck to paycheck. And that's stressful, that's really stressful. And I'd really like to see, everyone have access to something like this where they don't have to worry about it.
That's a really good philosophy to have. Everyone has access to good money management advice.
And learn how to do it, set themselves up, and then just know. Because that's the whole idea. I don't want people to stay with me forever. I want to teach them the concept, set them up well, and then they're off. They don't need me anymore, and or someone like me. They don't need someone like me.
Well, look, let's wrap this up. How does someone find someone like you?
Okay, so I mentioned right at the start that there's about 100 spending planners around Australia now. And
rarer than hen's teeth they are.
Rare as hen's teeth, absolutely. But if you there's a website called findaspendingplanner.com, and you'll see listings of different people all over the country. So you can take your pick. You can, check out their websites and see if they gel with you, and go from there, really. There are lots of other things that you can do. There's another company, I won't mention the name of them, but they're fairly well known, and they will, I'd like to call it...
In town or?
No, not they're actually national.
Oh, okay,
they're
sure.
national. They advertise quite a bit on TV.
Yep.
They will babysit your money. They'll give you some pocket money. They will pay all your bills. They will not teach you anything about managing your money.
Wow.
But you will pay them an exorbitant amount for them to take control of your money. And then you'll just keep
That is the best business model ever.
It's a fantastic business model.
Huh.
And she's very, very wealthy, this woman who has that business model.
I'm in the wrong business. What am I doing with my life?
But there are a number of clients who have kind of left that model, not learnt anything, ended up back where they
And they lost all of the commission that they've paid.
That's right. So there's that. There's, you could get a copy of The Barefoot Investor, and, I recommend that book for a lot of people because I think he's got some great tips, but it's not going to be, it's a book. You read a book and not necessarily apply it. A lot of people won't apply that advice, or they'll need, a more customized plan for their situation. You could download an app, you could get $100 app, but it's the same sort of thing. If life, like for instance, I'm working with a client at the moment, and she calls me the other day and she says, I'm going to throw a total spanner in the works. I'm going to go on a sabbatical in Spain, and I don't know that I can do the spending planner anymore. And I'm like, no, you don't have to abandon. You can actually
just build it in.
You can actually build it in. You can model the whole trip and know that, the Airbnb rent money is going to cover your rent for your house. You can do all that modeling before you go so that you're okay.
Yeah, okay.
And then it's very portable.
Yeah, okay.
For people. And
so you can find your own spending planner, or they can find you, Bright Spenders, is that right?
Yeah, so I have a website, brightspenders.com.
Oh, not .au, just .com.
It's .com because...
Somebody else had it?
No. Someone didn't have it. It's interesting. I got a question about why wasn't it .com.au the other day. It's because I can actually work with people anywhere in the world. I have a client in California at the moment.
So you are doing it Tim Ferriss style, as flexible as possible.
I'm doing it. Yeah, I can see people anywhere. I do Zoom video teleconferencing, and I can pretty much work with people anywhere. However, I am really deeply kind of motivated to get it going here in a big way, because I really like the touchy-feely aspect of going and sitting with someone around their dinner table and looking at their finances. I like to be able to see people and, and just and get to know them in the local area. That's really appealing, because I think I'm more interested in that because I have another business that I run online as well, and that's very much online. So
go on, throw it in there.
I've kind of missed talking to people face to face, I suppose. It's completely different. Totally different.
Why not? Unless it's X-rated.
No, it's not X-rated.
This is a family show.
It's not X-rated. It's a health business.
See, I knew it.
There you go.
There was a reason why all this was happening.
It's a raw vegan education.
Wow!
Website.
All right, we'll have to get you back to talk about that one day.
I don't know,
Are you a vegan?
Yes.
Oh, really? We're gonna have a polarizing conversation then.
Don't hold that against me. No,
I'm fascinated by veganism. It's just it's again like the discipline that is required, and plus I love cheese.
I have to say that was one of the hardest things for me to give up too. It was super, super addictive.
All right. Well, that's a pretty good note to leave it. Thanks very much for coming on today. This wasn't one big infomercial. I was really fascinated about how Anthea's philosophy played out, and I'm really glad we did this actually, because I now need to go home and manage my budget. This has been HighCast. Next week, Battle for Berrima. This should be a good one. Thanks very much. See you next time.